I've been a paid content creator for over 8 years, and today I'm going to talk about all the things that nobody tells you about being a content creator. My husband and I started making content for ourselves back in the early days of Instagram and slowly grew that by just doing little video gigs or making content for social media for other businesses and people in our city. Then we had our social media agency, Pathfinder Productions, that we scaled to over 6 figures. Then we have our podcast studio, The Pod Place, which I'm here at now. We opened up our second location and we just expanded our first location to have more rooms and more sets. We've also been making UGC content for the last 4 years and making content and ads for other brands. And our podcast studio has been built entirely around our skill set of making Instagram ads to grow our business. So here's what I want to tell you if you're someone who wants to be a creator, is that you get what you put in. It's the same as everything else. You can treat it like a side hustle and make a little bit of cash, or you can make it a whole business. My husband and I have built our entire lives around making content. So for example, when I first started in UGC about 4 years ago, I had been making content, personal content, for a long time at that point. I think brands naturally started reaching out and I was like, how can I get more of this? And I would see people getting like a ton of PR and working with like really big brands, and I was like, how can I do this more? And so when UGC was really getting popularized, I jumped in on it right away and I invested in it, even though it felt kind of like a side hobby or a side project for me, because our social media agency had always been the bread and butter of our careers, meaning that we always made the most money from it. But even though UGC felt like a side hustle, it was actually, I treated it like a business. So when I first started, I invested in a course so I could learn how people are actually really making money with doing UGC, how people are getting brand deals, and just how the whole thing works. So I invested in a course that allowed me to understand the industry. Secondly, I also invested in time in watching YouTube videos on what kind of ads are working. I watched a lot of Dara Denny, and the course that I actually was in was called Brands Meet Creators. And I highly recommend Brands Meet Creators if you're someone who is getting into UGC. I think they still have courses on like how to pitch and how to land brand deals and stuff like that. So I highly recommend that. And then on top of investing in the knowledge of the industry and the skill of like how to make ads that actually work, I knew that I was going to have to pitch in order to get clients, right? And so I did a little bit of it myself after I learned the process, but then I invested in a virtual assistant because I was a new mom at the time and I did not want to spend my time researching brands and pitching them emails all day long. I knew that I could leverage my time doing my more important or just better suited for my skill set. I wanted to be making content and I also wanted to be with my child. So I didn't want to spend more time than I needed to doing pitching. And I knew that was a really important part of the process. So what I did was I hired a virtual assistant. She would look for brands that were kind of in my niche. She would scrape their contact email to send the pitch to, and then she would personalize the pitch to that brand. And she would send the email on my behalf. When the brand responds, then I would respond and we would start the negotiation process, which is something that I also had to learn through. A lot of it was through my husband because he was really learning sales at the time. His career had taken him to a point where he needed to learn sales and negotiations, and so a lot of that kind of rubbed off on me just from being around him. But I also would highly recommend or encourage you to learn your own sales skills and negotiation skills, because that's also going to be really helpful in business, and yes, even in content creation business, because it is a business. You can treat it like a business. You're going to need to learn business skills such as sales and negotiation and marketing and things like that. So if you want to be a paid content creator, it doesn't matter if you want to build your personal brand, if you want to do UGC, you want to build a business, and you're going to need to have content for your business anyways, is that you're going to need to treat it like it's a real job, like it's a real full-time thing. The other thing that you're going to have to do if you want to be a content creator is that it's a real skill that takes time to develop. So they say 10,000 hours to become a master at things. I definitely feel like I put in the 10,000 hours since creating content. So I learned in 2018, it's now 2026, that's 8 years. I still know how to make good videos, and it's really fast for me and it's really easy for me because I've been doing it for so long. But people think that you can just start, making reels today and you'll get let's say like a brand deal tomorrow, and that's really just not how it works. I would say that you also need to invest time and skills into that. That's going to be the main thing that you have to focus on first in the very beginning if you want to be a creator and you are kind of starting at ground zero, is that you have to make sure your skills are really refined. Because in this day and age, everybody is a content creator, everybody wants to be a content creator, and so there's a lot of really good skilled people out there that if you're just kind of starting out, you really need to practice on that first. And I would try to dedicate as many hours as I can to doing that. I just picked up a new hobby about 6 months ago, and it's DJing. And in the beginning, I would just practice when I had time for it, when I just kind of felt like it. And in those times, I was making zero progress. Like, it's just kind of based on whenever I had the motivation to practice or to learn it. And that really wasn't getting me nowhere. So the moment I decided that I'm gonna make weekly DJ sets was the moment I actually started to see progress. And so I make these weekly DJ sets every single Sunday, and during the week, late at night when nobody's awake, I sit there and I practice and I watch YouTube videos for a couple hours almost every night, like 3 to 5 times a week. Because I know that I'm going to be doing that on Sunday, it forces me to practice. If you set a, let's say for content, especially for short form, making content almost every day would be ideal. If you're somebody who is new and you're starting to develop those skills, it takes time and repetition to get good at anything, right? So if you kind of force yourself into a certain schedule where you say, I'm going to post Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, then you know that you have to, come up with the concepts, and you have a schedule and a structure that you can follow. Because otherwise, if you're going to say, I'm just going to make content whenever I can, however I can, whenever I have time, whenever I have the motivation to, it's really, really easy to push that to the side and just be like, I'm too busy, I have my other full-time job, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. It's really, really easy. But if you commit to something that is structure and you really, really stick to it and you say, I'm going to do this no matter what, that's when you really start seeing growth. And it's something that you can constantly be learning and upgrading. So with content creation, you have quite a bit of skills that you need to master, like the camera, which for most people is going to be their phone. You have the editing, you have lighting, and you have, like the equipment factor. You can also be learning stuff about not just the technical skills, but marketing, what makes a good video, storytelling skills. You can also be upgrading your equipment anytime you can, anytime you have extra money, or set aside money to constantly be upgrading your content. I remember that's something that my husband Oscar has always been into, is like the next camera. He'd be so excited about a camera, and he'd be like doing all this research about it, and then he'd be doing research on lighting. When I first met him, we didn't use lighting very much, but throughout the years and with, client gigs and just experience, he learned how to light up a set really, really nicely, like better than anybody I've ever met. And it's just through experience and practice, and of course YouTube tutorials, because where else do you learn anything? But so we have this beautiful podcast studio where he knows exactly how to light every single set so that it looks beautiful in here. Like, look at this lighting on your screen right now. This is all thanks to his dedication to mastering his craft, which he's always been into more of a cinematic look. He's always used real professional cameras and things like that for his content. So that's the dedication to mastering the actual craft. So whatever lane that you decide that you want to go into, make sure that you're always learning. Don't just get stuck doing the same thing and never going outside your comfort zone, or never learning like the next step or the next skill, or expanding your skills. Even just, getting 1% better every day is the goal, because that's going to compound. These are kind of some best practices that we found that we use in our businesses that's kept us growing. The first one is you always want to give more value than you receive. Now, a lot of times people who are working regular jobs, they think that their pay determines it's the amount of effort that they want to put in. I hear a lot of people say, well, I'm not getting paid enough to do that, so I'm not going to do it. Or I'm only getting paid this much, so I'm only going to do that amount of dollars worth of work. And coming from a business owner standpoint, it's kind of a loser mentality. I'm going to be really honest with you, because that's never going to level you up. If you keep the amount of value that you're getting paid for, you're going to stay stuck, because a business owner or a boss is going to see that, and they're going to say, why would I give her more money? She only does a mediocre job. Why would I promote her? offer, anything like that. It's the same thing with a business and when you're working with clients. If you just kind of give it like your minimum effort, it's going to come across. It's going to come across in the content. People can feel that. And so our rule of thumb has always been to over deliver, always. When my husband and I, we were just doing social media content for businesses in the beginning, his standard was a 24-hour turnaround time for everything. So if there was a gig and we shot a recap video for an event, that event video he wanted turned in the next day. For me, when I'm doing UGC, I always over deliver by delivering to them more videos, more variations than they were expecting or what was originally agreed upon. And the reason for this is because when you really please your clients, they're always going to come back. And if they don't come back, then they're going to recommend you to anybody. When we grew our social media agency, we did zero marketing for years. And the only way it kept growing is through word of mouth and through referrals. Our clients just always knew that we did a good job. They would refer us to someone else. People would ask them, like our clients, like, who's doing your content? Can I get their number? And that's really how we grew for a long time before we really started mastering like Instagram ads. So best practice in any business, but yes, even in creator business, is that you always want to over deliver and please your clients. So that also means always trying to be pleasant. I've seen a lot of people trashing brands for, they're being cheap or some things just didn't go right and they're, talking crap about the brands as a UGC creator. And for me, I would just never ever do that because I think your reputation is very important. Always just being nice and kind, even if it's just communication through email, even if you do not agree on a price or there's been a miscommunication or whatever, I've always just try to diffuse the situation and just try to be pleasant. Like be overly pleasant, be overly nice. Not because you're being like a people pleaser, but it's because I just feel like there's just not enough of that in the industry. I think that brands will really appreciate somebody who can, one, make good videos, two, make videos that convert, and three, that are a pleasure to work with. Like it's gonna be a no-brainer when you got all three of those things down and they like working with you. For most of the brands that I worked with from AGC, I have a ton of screenshots of brands saying it's been such a pleasure working with you and your videos are fire. So I always had repeat clients. So overall, if you're somebody who wants to make money being a content creator, this is probably gonna be the most valuable thing you can do, especially right now in this time and age where everything is built upon content. And I remember even back in the early days of Instagram and in 2018, and it was just me and my husband with a camera, and we were going around to businesses and seeing if they wanted content for social media. We knew even back then, like everybody wants content, every business needs content, and now every person is wanting to build a personal brand. So every single person and every single business needs content. This is gonna be the most valuable skill that you can learn for yourself. Yes, you can build a whole life around that. Yes, you can make a lot of money from that. So just do it. If you don't get anything out of this video other than this, is that you don't have to be perfect at making content, but you do have to start today. Start today, start practicing, start learning, and everybody has a phone, so stop putting it off, just start. In 10 years, you're gonna thank me. So that's all I had for you today. Thank you so much for watching. If this was helpful to you, please leave a comment down below on what your biggest takeaway was, and make sure you subscribe and like this video. Bye.